Okay. Well, gang, welcome to yet another episode of WIC TV, a cross-ideological space where we come together to talk about issues both political and cultural, from the silly to the serious. And we have a ultra rare afternoon stream today. I've been asked to moderate a discussion between Brianna Wu and Maron. And today we're going to be discussing, should women be allowed in the Secret Service? There are a lot of questions after the assassination attempt. Can women do the job? Are women up to the task? What limits, if any, should women face in the workforce when it comes to jobs that require physical stamina, strength of any kind, and things such as that? We'll get into the specifics, I'm sure, but yeah, thank you both for being here. Thank you to my audience for waking up a little early, right? Getting out of your, I don't know, work, watching on your lunch break. I don't know. But thanks for being here, and welcome to the show. And we're going to start with Maud. Go ahead. Give us your thoughts on this.
Sure. Well, I'm going to read to you guys the tweet or the post, I guess, that sort of led to this conversation. I wrote, in the days shortly after the conversation around the Secret Service agents that were around Trump in the Pennsylvania rally. I wrote, "We don't need female Secret Service agents or Black pilots or transgender anything. We need capable, competent, skilled workers at every level of the workforce and the freedom to say so. Don't discriminate for or against characteristics that don't matter." And I added in my first "Make America Great Again." So, yeah, that's what I said. And a lot of people agreed and some people disagreed. And I appreciate that Brianna was willing to have after we had a little bit of exchange on X, that she was willing to take this to conversation. And thanks for hosting us, Wick.
Oh, no problem. Well, thank you for being here. And yeah, I'm sure we will get to the heart of matter as we go. Brianna, please.
Mom, before I start, did I read correctly? You're also a former congressional candidate. Did you also run for office?
Indeed, we have that in common.
We're going to have to geek out about that at some point. We're on different sides of the aisle, but
and I ran as a Democrat, Brianna. I no longer am a Democrat, but I ran as a Democrat, having been a Democrat for many decades.
Fair enough. Fair enough. So this is I'll keep my opening statement ultra brief. Wick, it seems to me there is a continued conservative project to push women out of public life. You're seeing a huge resurgence in a push in Republican spaces to deny women the vote. You're seeing a lot of conversations in the red pill space with things like Fresh and Fit to kind of talk about women, how we don't need to be in the workforce. And Maud, I'm sure today as we're doing this discussion, you're going to bring up some things that I'm going to agree with about the realities of physical biology limiting women from certain kinds of work, right? We're not going to disagree on that, but I think it was the really broad nature of your statement that made me really take issue with it, and I look forward to really getting into that. I think you're asserting a bunch of things that there's not much evidence for.
Okay, and with that, I guess we'll get started. I guess specifically, just to go back to you just briefly, her statement, her initial tweet, right, seems to be pointing to meritocracy as kind of the guiding principle. What is wrong with that, in your opinion? I guess just get that.
So, as someone who made her name initially kind of talking about women's structural barriers in the video game industry, this is the game that I've seen. Maud, I'm sure you and I would not disagree that for you to be, say, a UPS driver, you need to be able to lift packages of, what is the requirement, 50 pounds, right? If you're going to serve in a tank, you need to be able to lift those munitions. I think all of us would agree on that. What I have seen over and over and over in my career are is kind of it's not meritocracy, but meritocracy tends to be defined in ways that exclude women from the workforce. And I think a lot of the language that you use, particularly with transgender people, I think it was really cavalier, and I think it seemed to indicate that there's like a crisis of people being selected for jobs they are not fit for, and I don't think there's much evidence for that, actually.
I think there's a ton of evidence for that. And I think that at this point, even people who have been sort of the left and are consider themselves progressive or lefty, Bernie Sanders supporters, and I used to be one, will acknowledge that hiring decisions in this country across the board in public sector jobs and private sector places are meritocracy isn't even part of the discussion in some places. I live in Lower Manhattan, live in a super blue neighborhood, super progressive, super liberal area. Registered Dems outnumber I forget if it's 7-1 or 9-1 in my congressional, in my Lower Manhattan districts. But I know men who have said to me, "Oh, I've been told to my face we can't possibly hire a white man." Anecdotal, I acknowledge, but like it's not uncommon. And I'm not talking about people who are culture warriors. I'm talking about regular dads at school drop off who will say things like, "I've been told to my face, you're great. I'd love to bring you on board, but I can't hire a white man." That's the crisis. That's the problem. When we get to the point where certain positions are not open to people other than people who check the right box for skin color, sex, or some other kind of characteristic.
So I hear what you're saying. Would you concede for this discussion that the two pieces of evidence you just gave to back up your assertion are both just anecdotal? You named a conversation with the dad and then a broad claim about stuff you've just heard. Would you agree that that is ultra anecdotal?
I think I don't have to concede it because I said it while I was speaking. That was anecdotal. But I'll also say that, and correct me if I'm wrong, but the Secret Service agency is aiming by, I forget their deadline, if it's 2025 or 2028 or something, but they want to have 30% female workforce by some fairly soon date. So, they're not saying we think hiring women will make our service better and therefore we're going to hire more women. What they're saying is they're not even saying it because at this point we have this idea that diversity for diversity's sake is just so obvious beyond question that you can put forth those hiring goals.
So here's where we're going to get into it, because Maud, I did a ton of research before this, and I agree with you that diversity for diversity's sake is pointless. And one of the reasons I've had such a break with the fringe progressive left, which you saw my trigonometry interview, I feel really strongly about this, that we're on the right path. So I agree with your mission that diversity for diversity's sake is a bad idea. Here's where I differ for you. What do you think the Secret Service does? What is your understanding of their mission?
Well, my tweet was
your statement was no women belong in the Secret Service, to be clear.
Hold on. Yeah. Let her say what she said.
Sure.
Well,
I said we don't need, and I stand by that 100%. If you told me that the new class of Secret Service agents was all male tomorrow, I'd be fine with it. If you told me it was all female, I'd be fine with it too. If the people that were being hired were the people that were most capable at the skills that they were being screened for.
Sure. So your statement, which we both agree, is we don't need women Secret Service agents. So my question to you, which I would like an answer to, is what is your impression of what the Secret Service does?
Beyond protecting the president and other VIPs and other people, and I suspect they have a fair number of safety, of protocols that I'm not familiar with. But I was specifically referring to, and I think most of the people understood, the protection of the president, which is probably the sort of most iconic role. Let me say one thing, Brianna, like with regard to women, two things pop into my mind. One, you've been really, really, I think, amazing, and I'm in strong agreement with you and appreciative of your tweets about Israel, Jews, anti-Semitism in this country. We're in lockstep on that, and I think it's great to hear it coming from someone who still identifies of the left. That hostage attempt where the IDF went in, where Noah. I forget the names of all the hostages. The most recent one where the IDF did that kind of like, it looked like an episode of Fauda going in to rescue those hostages. I read that prior to that, the intelligence was collected by having male and female IDF forces go in to that area and do the work that, in order to be posing as a woman in Gaza who is collecting intelligence, you have to be a woman who's right, who does it. So those are fierce warrior women who were doing a job that they needed a woman to do at that moment. And I think that's pretty impressive.
Okay.
Flip side, Harrison Butker or whatever his name is, I don't know his name, that kind of Catholic conservative. I'm not a big football watcher, but the guy who gave that commencement speech, I liked his speech. I didn't agree with I tweeted about that too. I didn't agree with everything he said, but he was saying like, it's okay to be a woman who says, and he was anchoring it in faith at a Catholic school and in his own faith. It's okay to be a woman whose chief goal in life is to be a homemaker and a mom.
Of course.
I think both those things are true. It's awesome that those IDF women were so skilled and so trained at what they're doing. But it's also okay to say, like, I don't want to be in the IDF or the U.S. military or a Secret Service agent. I want to be a mom. You can be both those things.
Sure.
I'm writing that down so we can come back to it, because I think that's a different conversation fork that I do want to return to, because you can find literally hundreds of statements of me talking about the importance of giving women resources for childcare and how every woman does not need to have a career. We agree on that, and we will come back to that. But I have to go from your statement that you made on Twitter, which we both agree is we don't need women Secret Service agents. So I want to tell you, I did a bunch of research on here. Here's what the Secret Service actually does. We agree on the protective operations, right? There are protective details where women agents are just ultra helpful, right? Let's say a woman politician is a women-only event. There's some advantage to having that there. Investigative duties, right, including credit card fraud, cybercrime. There's no reason a woman can't investigate credit card fraud. Like, give me a break. Collaborating with other law enforcement, emergency response, public outreach and education. Like, how about this? Like going undercover, blending into operations. A huge part of what the Secret Service does additionally is patting down and providing security. You have to have women Secret Service agents for that. If you have somebody coming in from, the Middle East, they're not going to be really hyped up if their wife is getting patted down by a dude to make sure that they're safe. So there are all kinds of extremely obvious needs for women to be in the Secret Service roles. So all of us are going to agree. If it comes to like a body person, I want someone there with a lot of strength. That should be a top prerequisite. But your statement, I feel, is so disrespectful to the many women that work in the Secret Service on credit card operations, on undercover work, on like hunting down currency fraud. There's no reason they can't have that profession.
Okay,
So
I'll let you
sure,
respond in a second, but just to be clear, Brianna,
yeah.
when it comes to the body protective detail, I guess we probably will both cede to all the other things, but when it comes to specifically body protective detail, what is your position on women being assigned to those roles?
I think I can see there being a limitation there that you need to be able to take down a very large person. That feels reasonable to me.
Come on, go ahead.
On that front, I'll say that, like, I can't take credit for this because I read it from someone posting it on Twitter, but it immediately made sense, which is that if you look at the protective detail or the bodyguards of famous people, you don't see Taylor Swift or anyone else walking around with a 5'4" woman as their bodyguard. They usually have people who are bigger than them, stronger than them, and that is you know, saying I don't think our federal government right now would post that you have to be at least 6 foot tall and able to bench press X amount. People would be some lawyer would be saying, we can't do this because we're going to get sued for it. You know, and who was it? I might have been Elon Musk who put a picture of Brienne of Tarth from Game of Thrones on about saying, yeah, some woman could do this job. Obviously, you can do that job. But I'll say this, if you're of that size, if you're capable, you can do it if you're a man and a woman, but you have to meet those physical qualifications. And it seems to me that those rather small women that were part of Trump's immediate detail were there. And I think a lot of Americans saw this as part of what has become the sort of DEIification of important roles in life. Can I prove that? No, but it was the vibe, if you will, that a lot of
We
people
can't
take
make public policy on a vibe, Mon. We
I'm not
can't.
making
So,
policy
so
vibe.
hold on. I
I
want to
made
look
a
at
tweet of it,
what
but I
you
want to
just
say,
said.
Hold on. You're
Sure.
both
Go
hold
ahead.
on,
Go ahead.
both of you. You're trying to talk over each other, right?
yeah,
And I
yeah.
get it. Just real quick, Maud. So just to be clear, and then I'll pass it to Brianna here.
Mhm.
But you think that if right, the agents, the female agents, had been male agents at the Butler rally, do you think anything would have gone differently?
We wouldn't have had that like incredibly great photo because if there had been a 6'4" guy instead of that short woman standing in front of Trump, the photo wouldn't have looked as good. So thank goodness for Donald Trump that he had that very short agent in front of him.
Okay, Brianna, go ahead.
So, Maud, your statement was you have a feeling that we don't have strength requirements for federal jobs anymore. Here are a bunch of them that we do have strength requirements for. Most obviously, federal firefighters. They have to be able to carry a 45-pound pack for 3 miles. I can go run 10K all day, every day. I couldn't do that. Like that is amazing. And that's for men and women. FBI special agents, Secret Service agents, Border Patrol, wildland firefighters, military personnel, corrections officers, park rangers, even the air traffic controllers have like strength requirements for their job. So again, hold on. So I think there's not a lot of evidence for that. What makes sense to me personally, like if you're running UPS, for instance, I think if they have a requirement saying you've got to be able to lift a package, I'm not going to be able to do that job. I can't even bench press 80 pounds. It is pathetic, right? So I think that's utterly fair to discriminate for me for that job. But I think for something like, say, an air traffic controller, I think they can look at that role and say, what are the strength requirements that we need? Or for a park ranger, I even think in certain like situations, you can distinguish for men and women and have slightly different roles. Yeah, I think that there's a general physical fitness that you can talk to. And my objection here is sometimes you can just tweak the rules a little bit and figure out, okay, we'll put these people in this work, like at UPS. They have lots of jobs for women, but those jobs don't require a lot of strength. So they get to be part of the workforce and they're not discriminated against, but they can work there. I think that is a reasonable goal for our federal government to work towards.
And I'm not sure it should be a goal. Let me come back to your tweak statement,
Sure.
like we should tweak things, but let me say this at first. I think the way I wrote this statement is sort of mod 2024, because when I was running for office, as you referenced when we started this conversation, I was incredibly careful about how I talked about any of these topics, because when you're running as a Democrat, when you're trying to stay in the good graces of Democrats, you have to talk about race, sex discrimination, transgender issues with like the greatest of care. And it is liberating and frankly really like nice to be beyond that, to get to the point where you can say like, you know what, I don't care what color my pilot is. I just want my pilot to be like that guy who landed the plane in the water in the Hudson River. I want him to be like the most skillful pilot ever, right? Sully Sullenberger. It's like, I don't care what color he is. And I don't want my federal dollars or tons of programs going to recruiting people because of this unspoken or spoken notion that everything is made better if we have, not everything, that jobs in certain areas are made better if they're reflective of our society on a race or gender or other levels. We don't ask that of our professional athletes. We never ask that, LeBron James have a seat because there's just too many black guys on the team and we need to bring in somebody else. So I don't know why we do that in our medical schools who are active, who are all in on a lot of affirmative action right now. Like, I don't know why we do it in areas where meritocracy is probably the most important. And when I said pilot, it's because we just don't have much margin for error in the people that make the sort of decisions that pilots make. And I think it's fine to state it baldly. And I was making a point, not just the point that was written down, but also by saying like, I don't have to bend the knee to the cult of DEI so strongly anymore. Nobody does in America because it's not serving our country's interests.
So I agree with you. I don't want someone flying my plane that doesn't know what the hell they're doing. We both strongly agree with that. Can I ask you, why do you think, if you had to guess here, why do you think there are fewer black pilots? Like study, I can, if you want to after this, I can show you a ton of studies to show there's just a disproportionate lack of pilots. Why do you think that is?
Well, do you think it has anything to do with a relationship to the thesis that James Damore put forth when talking about women in STEM at Google? Like,
no, so, I don't think the data shows that.
Well, there's a couple different threads of why people why groups of people, whether it be men or women or people from different nationalities, or go into areas. Certainly there's, as James Damore was trying to say, like men and women are different. And I think that's a fair statement. Like, and you're going to lean towards
black people and white people are inherently different that want to fly a plane.
Like I said, men and women are different, but
you're talking about black
pilots,
not male pilots and women pilots.
There's other non-internal things like the fact that, look at kids. I've done a ton of education advocacy in schools. We aim to fix things, and I'm going to talk about New York City specifically, but I think it's fair to say this relates to conversations all over in school districts all over the place. We're relentlessly told by sort of the DNC machine that there's systemic racism going on, and that's why there's an achievement gap between Black students and other students. Something the DNC as a whole never talks about is the fact that being born into a two-parent stable home correlates with academic success, with graduating high school, with all of these things. And in New York City, for instance, it's Asian families that have the highest rate of two-parent homes and stable marriages. And those things are legitimate factors. To answer your very specific question about pilots, I've never looked into the racial composition of pilots, but I
did. I've got the answer here. Do you want to know it?
Let her finish and then you can go. I promise. Go ahead.
I've seen programs all over the place, and I've talked to recruiters and to people everywhere where there is an active effort to remedy a problem before I think you've laid out the case that you do indeed have a problem. I don't think the color of the skin of the person flying a plane is a problem to be remedied. I think you have to stay on merit in hiring like that.
I hear you, and Wick, I just want to say I've not had a chance to talk as much, so just give me equal time at least.
Well,
okay?
now,
and
yeah,
the
now
ability to
the
interject if I don't get my questions answered. So, Maud, the question to you was why don't Black people, or are they not represented as much on planes? You seem to intimate that they aren't interested in it as much. And then you talked about DNC and some DNI. The actual answer for this is it's very expensive to become a pilot. There's an airport like maybe 2 miles down there, and I've got a bunch of friends that are private pilots. They've invited me to go learn since I love racing Porsches and driving motorcycles. It costs 6 figures to go get a pilot's license. This is extremely expensive. So there's kind of a base level lack of ability to go get the pilot license to learn to do that. Additionally, the military, and Wick, you can back me up on this, the pilot roles are actually really, really sought after. And the military has traditionally, according to many studies I can mail to you after we're out of here, has not done an equal job of giving Black people those roles. So if you're taking the role of going into the military to learn how to fly a plane and to get out, there's less opportunity there for Black people. The third one is mentorship. It's just true that most of my friends tend to look like me. They're liberal white women. And, when it comes to mentorship and the ability to get enough hours to fly these giant planes, there's just a lack of ability to make those friendships is a structural barrier. So you and I can agree that discrimination for preferential hiring for no reason is a problem. Right? I'm not going to agree with that. But I think that it makes sense in a society. You're a citizen, I'm a citizen, Wick is a citizen. I think, generally speaking, it is the job of the government to look at things and to create smart public policy. What you had here was a private company making the private decision to invest some of their money in a training program to give Black pilots a leg up to learn those skills and to give them the opportunity to learn that structural racism makes it very difficult for them to have that. And I see no issue with this whatsoever. I personally am not it doesn't hit me emotionally to see the ads of all Black crew planes, but I think that's a good mission. If a private company wants to do that, it's their business. I would never make the statement, I don't need Black pilots. It's just, I think it's so cavalier, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I think you took issue with my tone, and I think that that the enforced tone of reverence for all things lefty, including affirmative action, is a thing that I'm over, and I think a lot of the nation is over at this point. And you seem to be kind of wanting to tone police how we talk about things like affirmative action. Look, let me take issue with one thing you said in your list of why there are not enough or sufficient Black pilots. You said the military isn't giving out those positions enough that's what I'm talking about. We're talking about the difference between earning and giving. Or if there is evidence of racism in the military that a qualified Black man is not getting the opportunity to be a pilot, I would be opposed to that and in favor of finding out a way to end it and remedy that. But that's different than saying, let's have a meritocracy and may the best people, when you're in the military and you're being trained to fly planes, our taxpayer dollars are being used to train up the best possible pilots. And I'm okay if women aren't getting 50% of those seats. I'm okay if people who came from middle-class homes that were better prepared for tests or this or that are the people that are getting disproportionately promoted. I am also very okay with and support all over my city programs designed to help the kids who, for whatever systemic reasons, whether it's poverty or whether it's racism or whether it's anything else, those folks who don't have as clear a shot, of course we want to help them get forward, but not to the point where we say, oh, we're going to promote somebody who's less qualified, less able, and less prepared in the present moment.
Sure, I have
it's not. Oh,
no,
just let me respond.
Respond.
It's
and then I have a
not
question.
tone policing to point out that you're making an argument that is not true. That's not tone policing. It's examining your argument, taking it respectfully on the merits, doing my homework, and finding out it's just not true. That's not tone policing.
Let me ask you something. So we've talked a little bit about sex and race, but on the transgender front.
Sure.
Boy,
this is the big one. I did a lot of research for this.
In what possible way is any profession or any job description better served, with the exception of maybe like a drag show or something, like better served by a man who likes to dress up as a woman and pretend he's a woman? Like in what?
None.
So
Like there's no, I looked up and down for evidence of some sort of public policy stake of trans people being hired, like preferentially over cis people. And just to remind people, your statement is, quote, "We don't need transgender anything." So let me tell you what I did find looking into this mod, because this really gets to the heart of my thing. You're giving me some statements based on bias. There are some edge cases of some weird situations where 1 or 2 trans people got hired for something. It's not a big national trend. Here are the absolute stats. Here are the areas where trans people can be discriminated against. 26 states have no protection status, and you can be fired from a job just for being trans. In healthcare, 29 states, you can just not be provided healthcare, not just gender-affirming care, any kind of healthcare just because you're trans. Housing, 28 states in America, you can be denied housing just for being trans. Identification documents, 26 states, you can't even get that fixed. Public accommodations, 29 states have no laws on this. Education, just getting a damn education to go on in life, have a job, be a productive member of society. 33 states have no protection statuses over that. Legal protections, 32 states lack that. Violence and harassment, 30 states have insufficient laws on this. And family rights, 35 states you can be discriminated against just for being trans. So there's a mountain of evidence that trans people are being discriminated against for jobs, but you turn it around into this evidence that I can't find, this argument that I can't find evidence for, that trans people are somehow being given jobs over cis people, and it's just not true.
So let me ask you something. Admiral Rachel Levine was just sort of outed as having, collaborated with and then concealed.
Sure.
Yes, his input into the WPATH guidelines that said that there should be no age limit for the various, what they call gender affirming care for minors. I think that, and I think, I'm not citing a study, but I think a lot of people might agree that Admiral Levine is in that job because it's a sort of poster child for a trans person high up in the federal government. Ordinarily, if you were found to have been saying one thing in your public role, a high up role in a federal, office, especially in a campaign year, then all this evidence comes out showing that behind the scenes you were saying and doing something else. That's the sort of thing for, heads would roll in other places. But you have this transgender person who is being sort of, held out there as a look at the only reason that like nuclear guy got the nuclear waste manager or whatever he was, the one who was stealing women's luggage, is because because he was stealing women's luggage. So you have people who are trans in positions of federal government who are sort of like, they're like the talisman for a lefty progressive sensibility that wants to say, look at us, we have these trans people in these high positions. And I think it'd be awfully better to have someone who actually followed the evidence than to have someone who pushes their trans agenda.
If I may ask at this point, when it comes to Admiral Rachel Levine, do you think that they are qualified for the position they hold?
No, definitely not. And
Why
the
not?
fact of the matter is, at this point, the evidence about collaborating with WPATH to remove age restrictions alone is a reason to remove that person from that role.
So I'm looking
that's
at
a different argument.
I'm looking. Well, fair enough, but I'm looking at their bio, says that they graduated from Harvard College. They went to the Tulane University School of Medicine. They became a physician. They were appointed by Governor Tom Wolf in Pennsylvania, my state, as the physician general. They were confirmed by Pennsylvania State Senate. In 2018, they were named Secretary of Health. During their time, they helped work on the opioid crisis. I mean, like, I'm just trying to find out why specifically you think this person is unqualified. That's all. Go ahead.
So, Whit, can I ask you a question? Are you
Please.
using they because Admiral Levine uses they pronouns?
I'm not sure their pronouns, to be honest. And so I'm being safe. Okay, I don't know.
Well, yeah. So I'll say this: you can look great on paper, but if you're somebody who, I think that having I know people who live as trans and they have found their own dignity and grace that way. And I very much want to live in a country where you're free enough to live how you want. And that includes living as a trans person if you want to, that's fine. But the level of job that Rachel Levine holds is one in which what is not unreasonably characterized as a mental illness. This is a man who wants to pretend all the time that he is a woman, and he wants other people to pretend it too, to the point where his ability to make public health decisions for minors is compromised. That is a good reason why, no matter how many fancy degrees you have on a piece of paper, you shouldn't be in that position.
I don't think that's very strong evidence. So 2 things. I just want to note, I gave you an avalanche of data. Hold on. I let you talk. I'll give you an avalanche of data talking about how there's structural barriers for trans people to get employment, housing, education, even have their children in this country. Avalanche of data about that, specifically researching, citing how many states it's an issue in. And your response is to go to Rachel Levine. I think her pronouns are she, as I understand it. And look, let's be clear. I have not said anything publicly about that WPATH stuff with her. But if you ask me, I don't support it. I think that's really shitty. I was really disturbed by that. I don't support this at all. I don't want the political process involved with monkeying around with decisions for minors. That's terrible. I 100% agree with you with that. That does not mean that A, she does not deserve dignity, even though she doesn't pass very well. And it also doesn't mean she's not qualified to have that job. This is a tendency I see with conservatives, respectfully, that I think you have our number to some degree when you say we are so obsessed about race and diversity that sometimes we make decisions and emphasize things that are silly. But at the same time, I think conservatives have a different bias where if you see a trans person in a high-level job, you have to assume that they didn't earn that job. Or if some conservatives see a black woman in a very high job, they assume that she didn't earn that job. And I don't think there's evidence for that. I actually think that you have a political project here that is really obvious from your mission, from your statements. I think you're not judging people fairly, and I don't think there's any evidence you have that trans people have some sort of structural advantage in the workplace.
Okay, we got to let her respond. Go ahead, Mom.
I'll give you 2 pieces of evidence, and then I want to go back to your laundry list of stats about trans discrimination.
Sure.
One, the last Supreme Court appointment. Joe Biden said he was going to appoint a black woman. He may as well just come out and said no white men need apply. It's the same thing, and it's evidence of discrimination. Karine Jean-Pierre, the White House spokesperson, Jen Psaki introduced when they were hugging and kissing, all they could keep talking about is she was a black lesbian. Well, that's nice, but do you going to see any white straight person being like, oh my gosh, we have a white straight person doing this job, a white straight person doing this job? It's we're supposed to clap like seals because she's a black lesbian. I don't think there's anything about her being black or being gay that makes her capable of doing the job or not capable of doing the job. I don't know why you would introduce somebody and get all the left obsession with the first and the representative and the it's turned toxic. If you go back a ways, if you are thinking of, I don't know, early sports figures that are breaking, the color barrier, or that are, I'm blanking on the name, but that I'm trying to summon to my the tip of my tongue, but like if you think of people who were firsts in the last
Jackie Robinson.
century.
Oh, sorry.
What's that?
Jackie Robinson, is that what we're talking
Yeah,
about?
Jackie Robinson is a great example, but like they're, I don't know, Lena Horne in movies, and you see people who are like that are the first. Of course, that's a big deal. It's a big deal when the first woman gets appointed to the Supreme Court. I'm not saying it's not something you would comment on, but we've gotten to a point now where we've had generations of Ruth Bader Ginsburg's experience as being one of a few women in law school. Like that's over. We now have more women graduating high school, college, and graduate degrees than men. So constantly pretending like we have to celebrate these things that are now not just the norm, but the actual majority is too much. With regard, and I'll make this quick, with regard to your laundry list of discrimination, you put in there things about IDs. Men getting to change government issued ID to pretend they're a woman, not being able to do that is not evidence of discrimination. That's evidence of good public policy.
Go ahead.
So I just want to come back to your statement. From what you're saying, you would think that, oh my God, the Biden administration is putting black people in everywhere. It's just diversity city. So here are the actual stats. 57.1% of the Biden administration's senior appointees are white. 42.9% are from various ethnic groups. 7.16 are Black and African American, which is lower than the percentage of Black people in the United States. About 28% are Latina or Hispanic, and 7% Asian. So, as far as like your statement about Biden coming out and saying, I'm going to like specifically put a Black woman in this role, I don't particularly like that. I've worked with Vice President Harris on some women's initiatives. I've enjoyed it. Her staff is great. She's fantastic. I'm not thrilled with the situation the Democrats are in right now with Vice President Harris and having no one else to run against to be able to swap in on there. I know Wick and I disagree with that. But I think this again comes back to, respectfully, this conservative, like choose your own adventure, base stuff on emotions, don't look at data. Like you assume there's a problem. And it's like, I'm open to the problem. And every single time today, when I go and look into what you're claiming, there's just not evidence for it.
I mean, look, if you want to have, if you want a laundry list of how many DEI programs exist right now, I'm a lawyer in New York, right? Right now, in order to get your continuing legal education, you have to take DEI courses, which are those ridiculous, the ethics portion of the DEI training in New York State right now does things like you can't use the word white paper because it's discriminatory because it suggests that white is good. The ridiculous things like the what is her name, Teku Olem or something, the academic who was saying that punctuality and a sense of urgency and objectivity are evidence of white supremacy culture. Is that everywhere? Yes. It's been promoted in New York City public school system where my children attend is the largest school system in the nation. 1 million kids, give or take, any given year. And that nonsense about white supremacy culture being punctuality in it has been brought in, paid for, by the way, hundreds of thousands of dollars in contracts to bring in diversity trainers to teach that. So it's everywhere. It's in the water you drink, in school trainings and teacher trainings, and this idea that I'm making stuff up or just casually observing things, when you can look at the amount of money that is spent on diversity trainings that promote this kind of race hoax nonsense that we live in some white supremacy culture. It's everywhere. So you can argue that it's good or bad, or kind of, you said before that we need to tweak certain things. You can argue the original affirmative action argument was, let's do this for a brief amount of time to even things out a little bit and then end it, right? Sandra Day O'Connor was one who foresaw an end date to affirmative action. The problem is it gets into the drinking water, and it's part of the raison d'etre of the left now, is to keep these programs going and expanding them to the point where it's the reason why people are doing things instead of a brief or short-term remedy to fix some you can make arguments that there's structural sexism or racism or problems in our country's past and some that still persist, but we're now not fixing those and trying to get to an end date. We've just incorporated that kind of DEI worship into our everyday life. And let me say something, let's go back to Rachel Levine for one more second. Do you think it's okay for people who interact with that person, that appointee, to not go along with the he wants to pretend she's a woman?
So you gave a laundry list of stuff. I was writing down as you're talking, so I want to go through this one at a time.
Can we start with her direct question, though?
I will
just
answer it.
Please.
I think you asked me a question. I'm going to give you a straight answer. I think you can do that, but I think you're an asshole. I think you're no different than the bigots in Mississippi that I grew up with that called black people the N-word to their face and couldn't act like decent people because they wanted them on the other side of the tracks. If you want to do that, it's free country, it's free speech. I don't know how far you think you're going to go in your career for being a jerk to people. That's my opinion. Don't have to agree. So I want to come back to your argument about affirmative action, because I actually agree with you on this. This is the first thing you said today that there's a lot of evidence for. So 10 years ago during Gamergate, I actually did spend a lot of time advocating for these kinds of DEI programs. I did it at Google. I shouldn't have said that. I did it for a whole bunch of different companies and like basically advocating for this. So I looked into this a few years ago because I think a really good question, if you're interested in public policy, is are the things we're advocating working? So DEI programs in the sense that there's a bad way to do it and there's a good way to do it. So the bad way to do it is like, oh, every single group is so special. And Wick, if you have a black woman on your show, you just better be sure to be aware of your white privilege and, blah, 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 blah. That does not work. Study after study after study shows that that does not lead to a better, more effective workplace. But we do actually have a lot of studies that show if you have a workplace that has programs to emphasize mutual respect for people, to consider if you might be expressing an unconscious bias. Both ways, by the way. That would go for a black person, like considering if they're not liking something because a white person is saying it, or a trans person because a cis person is saying it. If you have a kind of program that stresses mutual respect, there's actually a lot of evidence that that works. And just one last thing. My question for you is, you summed up everything for your job as a lawyer in New York as, quote, DEI. Now, be honest with me. Is that DEI stuff, or is that about non-discrimination in the workplace, which is a very, very legitimate thing for the government to be doing?
The DEI, the programs that a lot of Americans have to sit through, where you have to examine your unconscious bias and you have to unpack your biases, doesn't work. In fact, in workplaces where they bring in a lot of biases, they're showing that people are actually coming out a little worse on the scales of feeling, less able to talk to their fellow coworkers, and less able to. It's a net negative to put people through even benign sounding DEI style programs. It doesn't improve anything. And let me just say something with regard to the fact that it's like you're kind of an asshole if you call someone who's presenting themselves as a woman to not go along with the delusion. I would have agreed with you, a few years ago, and really thought like, what's the problem with using people's pronouns, whatever, even if the person, does a bad job sort of passing as the opposite sex. The reason I don't do that anymore, and it's so funny, a few years ago, I had this conversation with Kara Dansky, who's a great writer and speaker on these issues. And Kara was saying, I won't use people's quote unquote preferred pronouns. And I was like, oh, I don't have a problem with that. It seems kind of nasty or mean not to do it. I've come around to her way of thinking about it in very large part, because and it goes both ways, men and female, but it's I think it's overwhelmingly driven by men who demand in a very manly way to have their needs met, to be referred to as women. And I think I see it trickle down. I have a daughter who's a female athlete in high school, and she runs track. And the fact of the matter is, I see all these girls all over the country losing medals, opportunities, and podium places to boys that are pretending to be girls. And we've written into our laws and into our sports regulations that they have the right to do it because we're pretending like it's a civil rights issue. It is not a civil rights issue for boys to pretend that they're girls and then take away female same-sex spaces and female opportunities and girls' opportunities. And the reason I won't call Rachel Levine a woman, even though he wants to pretend that he's a woman all the time and have people refer to him as a woman, the reason I won't do it is because it overwhelmingly impacts negatively on women everywhere in the country, and particularly young girls who are losing out on same-sex spaces.
Okay, so we're going into a transgender debate.
Yeah.
We can if you both want, but the
I
subject
don't want
is,
to, but I do just want to be able to refute that really
respond.
quickly.
But then I have a question that maybe get us back on topic a little bit.
That sounds good, because I didn't want to get into trans.
Sure.
It feels like everything just derails into it today. So look, I agree with you. I think I'm on record saying this. I think if you're trans, it's your responsibility to help people intuit your pronouns. I think this kind of enforced way. My problem is the other way with conservative spaces, where there's a malicious political project, even if someone passes, even if they're normal, even if you might not even know that about them, if they didn't tell them, to go out there and maliciously misgender them. And I think this political project is no different than back in the 80s when we used to call gay men the F word. It's no different than calling black people the N word, is to fundamentally dehumanize them. So this is my statement to you. If you want to have a logical public policy-based discussion about women's sports and scholarships and the degree to which trans women should be included in that, go look at my tweets. We probably agree on a lot there. But the difference in our political projects is mine is about dignity for women, which is what I fought for my entire career, and dignity for trans people. Trans people are our fellow citizens. They need access to the commons. They deserve respect. Your political project does not include that second component of it. I think that's fundamentally anti-American.
Okay. Just to get us back on track, maybe a little bit for the last part of this discussion. So I looked up the requirements for Secret Service members, applicants, and things like that. And much like in the military, there are different standards for men and women. So my question to both of you, and we'll start with you, Brianna, do you think that's fair or correct to hold women to a lower physical standards? And I'll give you some examples just so we can kind of square this in reality. So for push-ups, a man needs to get a good rating. Okay, there's several different ratings, but to get a good rating, they need to be able to do 46 to 4. If they're 20 to 29 years old, they need to be able to do 46 to 49 push-ups in a minute. For women, it's 26 to 29. And we can look at this for sit-ups, for chin-ups, for 1.5 mile run. And the 1.5 mile run, to get a good score, a 20 to 29-year-old male has to run it in 11 minutes 42 seconds to 12 minutes and 51 seconds. And for a female, they have 14 minutes and 25 seconds and a 15 minutes and 26 seconds to get the same score. So I guess the question would be, is that leading us to situations where you have people who have, again, passed the requirements, but because the requirements are different for men and women, the women are as not able to do the job as well as men? Go ahead, Brianna, and then I want to hear from Maron.
So this is what I would say to that. I have no issue with the general entrance requirement that has slightly different standards for men and women. I think if you're getting down to the job itself, I used UPS earlier, right? Women cannot lift, I believe it's a 50-pound package very easily. They cannot become drivers, right? So I think for something like a body person or something where you may have to tackle someone or be a body shield, I think size requirements are utterly reasonable for that. Weight, strength requirements are utterly reasonable for that. But I think as far as a general entrance exam rule, considering that, as I outlined earlier in the debate, there's so much that the Secret Service does and so little of it is that particular portion of it, I think it is okay to have different standards there.
Maud, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, for the most part, I'll agree with Brianna on that. Like, yeah, you can have different standards for entrance as long as you then don't pretend that that those folks can do the same thing once you've come through the portal of different standards. Um, Let me just say something more broadly since we're going to wrap up, which is, Brianna, I have watched you. Gamergate, I didn't really know too much about because this is the first time I've ever been on Discord. That's not my world. You can see that, like, I read about Gamergate, like, in the New York Times back when I used to read the New York Times. Like, I just didn't know too much about it. You really came to my attention. Like, you have a whole interesting chapter pre me knowing anything about multiple chapters, I imagine, but like, it was really your tweets about Israel that I was like,
Sure.
oh, this awesome person who's like me, this former, maybe you're not former, but like this super lefty person who is like deeply frustrated with the left and deeply frustrated with, where things have gone off the rail. Israel's a great example, but there's other places where I feel like progressivism has gone off the rails that frustrate me deeply. But my question to you about you more broadly is like, it almost seems to me like at a certain point I was like, I ran for city council and as Congress as a Democrat and tried to articulate these moderate Democratic positions around criminal justice reform, around education. And at a certain point I realized, like, why am I trying to fight to modify, change, reform, or open the eyes of all these progressive lunatics who have gone so, that Colin Wright cartoon where like that guy's in the middle, the little stick figure in the middle, and then he's like stays where he is, but the left goes galloping off to the left, and all of a sudden you realize I used to be on the left, then I was kind of in the middle, now I'm on the right. You calling me a conservative still kind of cracks me up because in my family and my family were all like super Hillary voters, and I was like, Bernie Sanders, I love Bernie Sanders, he's so wonderful. I donated to his campaign. I was pregnant with my last child when he was running. I stood outside for hours, super pregnant, to go hear him speak. I was
Oh,
so deep in that lefty world. But at a certain point, you realize, like, oh, I don't agree with what you're doing in my kid's school. I don't agree with what you're doing on foreign policy. Ukraine is a disaster. Like Israel, it's shameful what, the fact that we have American hostages there and our president can't be bothered about it. And so all of a sudden you realize, well, actually, bizarrely, despite you're right, there's some weird, like, old school misogyny on the right. And despite the problems that are on the right, so many more of my value driven concerns are being addressed, shockingly to me, still by Republican politicians in this country right now than, I mean, to me, JD Vance and Donald Trump are talking about the things that matter to me and my family and the safety in ways that Joe Biden and Kamala Harris just aren't. And so, like, why are you so insistent on trying to, like, bring back a ship into port that sailed a long time ago instead of just looking for a different home that aligns more with your values as you articulate them?
Go ahead.
So I hear you on that, and I think my statement would be there are a lot of conservatives I have great relationships with. You and I, even though we disagree, I think very heavily on the trans stuff, and I don't like what I'm hearing from you on that. I think generally speaking, we share the same values. And if you drop a lot of this like malicious like misgendering, we'd probably find a lot of common ground on public policy. My mission right now is to look for reasonable people that I can come up with good public policy on. So, but the truth is, and you're not going to want to hear this, I think the Republican Party has become fundamentally anti-democracy. I think there's a denialism about what happened on January 6th, that we have never had an honest discussion about this. I think the Supreme Court is making decisions that could literally tear our republic apart. So even though I may agree with more Republicans on Israel, I think their fundamental project is so anti-democratic. And let's be clear, like you and I have both run for office. We know Twitter is not reality. There are a lot more wicks out there than there are demon mamas on the left, okay? So what I want to do is cut the demon mamas off, treat them as the cancer that they are for the left, and double down on talking to the wicks and the moderate Republicans and try to say, look, we're not going to agree on this public policy. We're not going to agree on that. We can't agree that corporations are screwing the little guy. So let's talk about getting your school better in your neighborhood. That's my project.
Okay. Well,
I'll
we have
sit. Wait, Wick, let me just add one thing.
Please.
When you're ready to leave the progressives behind and come over to the center right world, Brianna, I'll be here. And if you're in New York, I'll take you out for a drink on that note.
That.
And to be clear, right, when you're ready to come back into the fold of the Democrats and realize we're not all crazy, we'll welcome you open arms, right?
Thank you, Wick. That's very
problem,
kind.
No problem. Okay, gang, this has been quite a discussion. I have enjoyed the back and forth. I am going to give each of these individuals closing statements where they can give their final thoughts, as well as tell people where you can find them. I put links to their stuff in the description of my YouTube video. Please check that out. And just on my end, if you've enjoyed this content, please like the stream. Please subscribe to the channel. It really helps me out. Thank you for the gift subs on Twitch. Thank you for the super chats. I'll be reading them shortly. But yeah, with that, and we're going to be live tonight at 6 p.m. Eastern.
Woo!
Talking with the girlies about cinema and why movies suck nowadays. We'll have Fairy Queen on for that. We'll have Daniela and we'll have Maeve. So it should be fun. But for now, I'm going to give the mic first to Brianna and then have Maud have the last word here. So Brianna, close us out. Give us what you got.
So I just want people to understand what they just watched. Maud and I went through a whole lot of things, and we agree on a lot of public policy, but we really get down to specifics. One person had a lot of data and evidence and specific stats she was citing, and the other person did not. So I just want you to notice that. I agree that a lot of the silliness of DEI goes over the line, but I think if you're making the argument, literally, quote, we don't need trans anything, we don't need black pilots, and we don't need women Secret Service agents, I think I've successfully argued today that actually there's a lot of merits to for two of those, that there's structural discrimination. It makes sense because we are a civil society to make sure people have equal access to employment. And the latter, there's actually a lot of stuff that women's Secret Service agents can do that is very helpful for them fulfilling their mandate. So thank you very much.
Oh, thank you. Where can people find you?
Brianna Wu on Twitter. I also do a show with Connor. If you like bipartisan talk, go check out Counterfire.
Okay, check it out, gang. Thanks for being here and really appreciate you asking me to moderate this. It's been a pleasure. Maud, please go ahead.
Well, thank you, Will, for moderating. I appreciate it, and thanks, Brianna, for suggesting it and for participating. So there's nothing that I've heard, respectfully, because I appreciate all the points you've made in it, but there's nothing I've heard that makes me think meritocracy, straight up, is not the best way to hire someone. I don't want someone to hire me over a more capable man because I'm a woman and they need to fill their woman quota. And I don't want to fly in a plane or have surgery or have my dry cleaner dry my clothes, clean my clothes because that person's been hired, not because they're the best at the job or not because they're the most capable, but because of a race quota or a sex quota. And I think we have to get away from the idea, and I used tone policing before, and I'll say it again, that the idea that there's only one acceptable way, the sort of breathless democratic way to talk about these things. It's okay to write the tweet the way I write it and just call a spade and say, we don't need female Secret Service agents. Are there some that are capable of doing the job and doing it well? Yeah, absolutely. But if you saw all those men who ran around Ronald Reagan when he was shot, no one thought, oh my God, if only there had been some women there. So that's why when people saw women who looked too small to do the job of protecting Donald Trump, there was a lot of discussion and I was responding to it. We do not need to talk about the left's shibboleths in special tones or in special ways. It's okay to say what I said because it's true. We don't need people to be hired based on immutable characteristics. We need people to be hired based on merit. And I think the majority of Americans agree with me on that.
Okay, well, where can people find you?
At Maud Maron on Twitter is where I'm most mouthy and most common.
Well, check her out, gang.
You should come back and do some more Twitch with us. This was fiery.
Be happy to.
Yeah, that'd be great. But for now, gang, we're gonna say goodbye. I have some other things I need to do, unfortunately. But once again, we're not done for the day. At 6 p.m. Eastern, we'll be live again. So check us out. Same bat time, same bat channel. Thank you again. Bye-bye, everyone. Bye-bye. Bye. Bye.